let's just start off, I think, with an account of the challenges. Just because those are myriad and seemingly always before us through the ubiquitous higher education press doesn't absolve us from having our own handle on what certain populations seeking access continue to face in America. So perhaps each of you can take a few minutes to talk about that from the point of view of your present work. And we'll move from that toward questions at the end, toward indications about where we might all need to go next. So, Mark?
So just let me give you a little bit of context. Georgia State University is roughly 53,000 students, 35,000 on our main campus in downtown Atlanta, another 18,000 spread across 5 campuses in the suburbs of Atlanta, which historically was a separate 2-year associate's degree institution. Of those 53,000 students, it's a majority minority institution, approximately 40% African American, 30% Caucasian, 15% Asian, 10% Hispanic, 5% self-declared as mixed race. 60% of our students are on federal Pell Grants, so 60% of our students are low income. So to sort of set the context, a very diverse institution, but with a student body that is economically challenged. And that is the single greatest challenge that our students face, which is what I'll refer to as economic fragility. So to put a point on it, a student is 7 times more likely to leave Georgia State for financial reasons as opposed to academic reasons. So academic issues are there, and certainly the lack of math preparedness in this country is an obstacle for students at many institutions. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, it's the economic challenges. It's one, accessing the institution, but more importantly, it's staying in the institution once you access it.
Thank you.
So I want to start with the big challenges and the big picture as well. There are 2 million people, over 2 million people locked up in the United States today. 40% of them are African American, although African Americans represent only 13% of the population in the US. 23% of those in prison are Latinx, again, disproportionate to their population in the United States. 80% of people imprisoned in the United States self-identify as low income. In short, our country's incarcerated population consists disproportionately of poor people who are members of racial minorities. The extent of the disproportionality can't be explained away on the grounds that poor people of color commit more crime. Decades of research have taught us that this disproportionality is rather a consequence of systemic discrimination based on pervasive American ideologies around race and poverty. The effort to reduce barriers to entry to higher incarceration for systems-involved individuals, by which I mean people in prison and people who have been to prison, and to support their retention and success after they have been enrolled, is often presented as a public safety issue. For instance, the argument is often made, the more higher education in prison that we have, the greater the reduction in recidivism that we'll see. I hope my framing has helped you to think about it differently. People who have had the misfortune of being imprisoned do not represent future crimes waiting to happen. In any event, universities are not crime prevention programs. People in prison and those who have been incarcerated are people, deep, complex, and like all of us, full of promise, if given the right opportunities at the right time. There are 2 ways that expanding access to college and offering sustained support to systems-involved individuals aligns with our imperatives and responsibilities as institutions of higher education. First, incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals tend to carry other identities, for example, of race, class, gender identity, and immigration status, that we are already committed or should be committed to expanding opportunities on behalf of. Second, we need to expand access to higher education to people with criminal justice backgrounds because It's time to start acknowledging criminal justice status as a suspect class in itself. By suspect class, I mean a group that's been historically and persistently subject to discrimination under the law.
So I am coming from a different kind of institution than our previous two panelists in many ways, but overlapping as well. Northwestern is in that cadre of smaller to medium-sized universities, 8,700 undergraduates, 20,000 students altogether. We are a highly selective university, less than 10% admission rate, and a wealthy university by any reasonable stretch of the imagination. And a university that has, over the last 20 years, this is my third year at Northwestern, over the last 20 years has certainly demonstrated a commitment to diversifying itself. But the diversification needs to be held with an asterisk following it. Like, what does a diverse student body look like in all different kinds of ways? Historically been very, what I'll call very traditional, a black-white spectrum, increasingly brown as well. And now at Northwestern over the last 5 years is really becoming much more, paying much more attention to diversity across socioeconomic status and also a tradition of college-going status in the family. And in this regard, we are like other schools like ourselves, highly selective private universities with resources that are just now beginning to do the work that state universities have been doing for a long time, that community colleges have always been doing. So I, as the provost of the university, in telling you we're late to the game, but we're working very hard to catch up, or at least to make our contribution. That work is also expensive work, though, because this is a population, Pell eligible, and also first generation students that are not the same students, by the way. They overlap, they, like a Venn diagram, intersect, but they're not perfectly overlapping. But this is a population that is coming to a place like Northwestern with a different resource base, obviously speaking. So Northwestern has become very good at identifying or finding talented students out there, wherever they happen to be in the world. And we found ways to connect with them and get them interested in applying. And we found ways that once they've been admitted, to make college affordable. This is a very expensive proposition. The hard work is, once they've come to the campus, what are you going to do to make sure that they thrive? This is not about their intellectual talent. We do not admit people to Northwestern who we believe cannot survive at Northwestern intellectually. I want to be very clear about that. Diversifying the university on racial lines, diversifying the university on socioeconomic lines, diversifying the university on college-going tradition is not about reducing the quality of the student body. It is about broadening the world of ideas and considerations that are now in front of us at the university. And after all, that's what we should all be about doing.
I can't disagree with anything my colleagues have said, and I won't repeat what has been said. I will say briefly that the situation of Georgia State mirrors pretty much Prairie View A&M University, where I currently am president. But I rather think the biggest problem we all have is preparing our students for the cruel world that they're going to face. And I mean that in the sense of, you talk about inclusion. Well, you might be included at Northwestern, but you have to go into the country where policymakers are spewing vile assertions about the unworthiness of the very students that you are prepared to include. So what are we going to do about that? That, to me, is a very compelling issue that not only universities can assist with, but foundations and other policymakers who are more inclined to understand that humanistically speaking, there is a connection among all of us. And somehow we have to be as aggressive, we have to be as viral as the forces of evil in explicating why it is we must cling to each other in this hostile environment where we find ourselves.